My name is LaJuan Pringle. I serve as the chair of the Committee on Legislation's Grassroots Subcommittee. I'm also a branch manager with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'd like to welcome you to the Take Action for Libraries, Advocating for Libraries at National Library Legislative Day webinar. National Library Legislative Day, or NLLD, as it is commonly known, is a two-day advocacy event that brings hundreds of librarians, trustees, library supporters, and patrons to DC to meet with their members of Congress and to rally support for library issues and policies. Today, I will talk with various library advocates from across the country who will share their experiences at NLLD, discuss advocacy practices, best practices, and offer tips as to how you can advocate from home. If you've always wanted to advocate for libraries but was never quite sure where to start, then this webinar is the one for you. Our guests today are all respected library leaders who have years of advocacy experience. Please join me in welcoming Kent Oliver, Library Director of the Nashville Public Library, Chair of the ALA Committee on Legislation and its Grassroots Subcommittee, Anthony S. Chow, Ph.D., University of North Carolina at Greensboro School of Education, Department of LIS 2017 School of Education Faculty Assembly Chair, and Chair of the North Carolina Library Association Legislative and Advocacy Committee. We also have Mary Hastler, CEO of the Hartford County Public Library, the Hartford County Commission for Women Chair, the Maryland Humanities Board, a member of the Committee on Legislation and its Grassroots Subcommittee. Thank you all for joining me today. It should be noted that we were also going to have Nicolle Davies, Executive Director of Charleston County Public Library, who also serves on the Grassroots Subcommittee as a part of this panel. But Nicolle was unavailable to join us as a result of Hurricane Irma. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to wish her, Charleston County Public Library, the Charleston, South Carolina community, and all of the other communities who have been affected by this storm, the best of luck and a speedy recovery. We are all thinking of you today as we talk. So I know I've briefly introduced you all, but would you all briefly share some information about your career experiences and how your role as library advocates evolved? We'll start with Ken.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, I've had the privilege of participating in Legislative Day with actually 4 different state organizations, Missouri, Kansas, Ohio, and now Tennessee. And so it's been great to experience it from a number of different viewpoints. I've also had quite a bit of experience advocating on behalf of intellectual freedom issues with both the Office of Intellectual Freedom and through the Freedom to Read Foundation. And of course, local experiences, which we'll be talking about later, I'm sure. But advocacy has been a big part of my career, and I'm so pleased to be here today.
LaJuan, did you? Hi, this is Anthony Chow. Hello from Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm a professor at UNCG's LIS department. I think I've been involved directly for 6 years, and I can definitely say that when I first started, North Carolina would traditionally bring a bus of people, and I think our approach at that time was shock and awe, and so I was definitely one of the people that was willing to, of course, advocate, speak to libraries. And then over the years, we've kind of refined our approach a little bit as far as really looking at, I do remember when I was in the shock and awe group that we would overwhelm legislative aides, and I would watch kind of their nonverbals and realize that maybe some of the things we were doing weren't as interesting. They didn't find our passion for libraries maybe as interesting as we did, and so it's fascinated me, and so certainly I've had the privilege of kind of learning from a lot of the the strong leaders in North Carolina, and then working with LaJuan on continuing that trend. So thank you.
Mary? And Mary?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Mary Hastler, and I am the CEO of Hartford County Public Library. And advocacy takes so many different levels. It's local advocacy, it's national advocacy, it's your state advocacy, It's really about relationships, partnerships, being engaged and embedded in your communities. It's understanding what's important to us as libraries across the country, but it's also really knowing what's going on with everyone else and finding out how we support and provide that safety net and pull it all together. So I think I started advocating, well, many, many years ago when I was in healthcare administration at Hopkins. And I brought that over with me when I joined Library World. And it's really critical. We know what we do, which is amazing and important, but it's also telling others, sharing our stories, sharing why we're so critical to the economic health for any community and making a difference. So advocacy is done on so many levels. It's done 365 days a year. And that's why I think it's really critical. And I'm really excited to be part of this webinar today.
All right, thank you all for those great responses. Tell me, what does advocacy mean to you as individual leaders? You kind of touched on this in your introductions, but I'd like to know more. Mary?
Well, as an individual leader, it's really critical that we're at the table. You know, there's that old saying that if you're not at the table, that you're going to be lunch, and I always get the words twisted, but it's really critical that we're there, that we talk knowledgeable about what's happening in the libraries and why it does make a difference, because we're selling our story. And remember, our elected officials, they hear from all the constituents. We are just one of thousands out there. So what makes us different, what makes us unique, and what makes what we're trying to do and accomplish resonate with them so that they go to the mat for us. So as a leader, it's really critical to have that understanding and really know your community and know the folks that you're talking to. Because if not, people really understand very quickly if you're not being genuine, or if you're not really being sincere, or if you have no clue what you're talking about.
Yes, so true. Anthony?
Well, I would, of course, support everything that Mary just said. I would say also, and Luana and I both, I think, have grown together on this. One of the leadership things that we do for advocacy in North Carolina is just try to plan and organize ourselves. I think that one of the things we found is so many people are so passionate about libraries without a more unified voice. And we've had feedback from our legislative offices asking us to be a little bit more organized and know when to call on the dogs and then call off the dogs. And so I think that Luana and I have kind of provided a little bit more structure in terms of trying to advocate, organize our advocates. And I think the other thing I would share is the student ambassador program. So kind of building on what Mary said. I think one of the pervasive stereotypes is the new generation, the digital natives. Do they need libraries as much as we did? And so we created the Student Ambassador K-12 program, and the answer is yes, definitely. And then what we've been able to do, because we are in North Carolina and in drivable distance, we've been able to really connect our K-12 students with their legislators, and it's been extremely powerful as far as the stories that they're sharing.
And that's great. We're going to discuss that further. I'm sorry, Ken.
Yeah, no, and I just, again, we're hitting some great points here, but I vividly remember a conversation I had early in my career with the library director then of the Johnson County Library in Kansas City area, Roy Fox. And we were talking about some of the statutes that were in place governing libraries. And of course, I think as librarians, many of us tend to want to stand back and let things be done to us rather than influence the direction things are going. And, Roy commented to me that, there's much more to be gained than when you enter the political arena and try and affect change. And of course, I think that is what advocacy is. Advocacy is trying to affect change, hopefully to the better, for our libraries. And, it's about promoting, it's about asserting your position. It's certainly about collaborating, that's already been mentioned. But it's so critical that we take the position and assume the ground in our communities and in our states and nationally. The public libraries are essential. And they're not just nice to have, but they're essential to have. and without promoting our positions and talking about that importance, things are going to happen to us. We're not going to be able to influence the direction that we take in communities and the nation. And I would even say that our very survival and movement and change within libraries is dependent upon our ability to advocate.
And I just want to throw in there one of the most amazing things that we saw recently is we had Congressman Walker visit a library, and in the middle of the tour, so it was to meet with one of our K-12 student ambassadors, but in the middle of the tour, he kind of reflected out loud to everyone, and we had a big group of people, including local leaders, following him around. He said, you know, you guys call me, you email me, you hammer me with why library is important. He goes, but I had never realized how much you do for so many different people. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to share that moment because in the end, kind of building on what's been said already, I think it's really critical to get them into libraries as well.
And if I could build on that, I totally agree with you. When I was in Ohio, we certainly did that at Stark County. And I'm in the unique position in the United States and that Congressman Jim Cooper actually has his district office in our library. Wow. So we're very lucky in that regard. Maybe it isn't lucky, maybe it's good positioning, I don't know. But Jim is actually in our building every day. And two key figures for us right now, Senator Alexander and Senator Corker. Senator Alexander has been in our building on a number of occasions for special events. So I totally agree. You've got to get them in the buildings, and you've got to get them seeing in person what's going on.
And it's all about, and I'll continue to build on that thread because it's all about the electeds may not be your power user in a public library for whatever reason. However, it's their wife, it's their children, it's their grandchildren, it's their neighbors, it's the person they most respect who is. So when you can get them in your doors, whether it's virtually or through an event or an activity, and they can see and they can hear from their friends, from the kids, it just is so powerful because they know they love us, and they see us coming, but they really want to hear from their peers and from everyone that they respect, their friends and family, and especially their constituents. So it's really resonating with them and getting that message to them so that they see the value of whatever it is, workforce development, early literacy, digital literacy, you name it, it's whatever we're doing, and it resonates with them.
Yeah, and real fast, I just want to jump on what emphasize and applaud what Mary said about what we've learned too, is that it is a marathon. It is 12 months out of the year. I think again, that's something that I think in North Carolina we've evolved from. Is it's not just 1 or 2 days where we show up in mass. It really is a completely 12 months out of the year.
Absolutely.
So true. It never stops, does it?
Never stops.
No.
Not even if you wanted to. So the next discussion that we're going to launch into is sharing our various experiences and activities on National Library Legislative Day with our respective groups and contingents from our states. We'd like for you all to talk about your experiences and some of the things that you have learned going forward from your particular states. And we'll start off with Anthony.
Sure. I think we first started, so we've winnowed down our big group to a smaller group so that we can bring a more diverse group. So one of the things we discovered is that when I first started, that shock and awe was pretty much all people from libraries. And so what we've done is reduce that number a little bit so that we can bring student ambassadors and their parents. And what we've learned over the years is that we initially thought just kind of a heart-to-heart testimonial would be the way to go, but I think Luan and I learned with our state librarian that actually a script really everybody likes. And so I would say one of the things that has been really effective for us is not only bringing a diverse group and kind of going with Mary as well. It's important that in that group, the people that we're talking to, we have somebody from their district, their legislative district. That's also very important. But I'd also say the script. And again, I wasn't a huge fan of that concept, but we tried it this year and it really worked well as far as providing kind of a context. At first, I thought it would, impede kind of that passion and heart to heart, but I think it really served a great framework. So I would say that. And then the other part to that student ambassador program, I included the link in the chat, is that kind of, again, building on the 12-month concept. I thought definitely having a digital presence that would support our correspondence and support our visits also was very important. And so if you go to that link, you'll see that the entries of the student ambassadors, as well as things that we've created, are kind of digital artifacts that serve our cause 24/7. And I'll end with our most successful was, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but a couple of years ago we had some fun with happy dances. And so we had happy dances. I think we had 9 of them in North Carolina, actually a couple out of our state as well. But it generated so many hits, right? It generated so many hits to our advocacy website. And so I think that's the other part that we learned, is that really, obviously you've got to have a digital side to this as well.
Okay. All right, and Ken?
I'd agree with everything that Anthony said, maybe just a couple of other quick things. In addition to the idea that you have more than librarians, I think within your librarian group, you want to make sure and represent all different parts of our profession, especially the school libraries. That's so important, because a lot of times I think the offices relate to the school libraries particularly. So I think that's really important. And just that pre-organization, the idea that you are really organized on the ground before you get there. I think most states have this under control, but the states that I've been in that really do it well, the state library tends to be playing some type of critical role in it, in addition to your state association. And I know that isn't always the case, but I've always looked to the state library, and the state librarian is really trying to be a part of what you're doing, part of the effort, and certainly a leader of the contingent. And I think that's critical.
Mary?
And I would agree with both Anthony and Ken. And what's really important is we start planning for it months in advance. I would say September, as we kick off our legislative panel meetings for the year. But even before then, we've had a lot of information coming out during the summer months, because during the summer months in Maryland, our folks are back home, they're back in their locals. So many times we've seen them at events and receptions. So by the time we're here in DC for National Library Leadership Day, we're ready to go, because we have our script, and we discovered that we assign each person on the team a particular topic that they're comfortable to talk about. Our ALA handouts are wonderful. They really help a lot too. And what the fun part about National Library Leadership Day is you never know who you're going to be meeting with, or that photo op. We had a great time with Dutch Rupersberger's staff this year. And one of the students we had with him evidently went to school where he had a connection, so he posed for photos. Another time with Barbara Mikulski's the senator, we met out in the bridge, just out in the middle of the hallway, and did our presentation there. That was perfectly fine, because you never know who else is going to be in that boardroom. But the important thing is there's lots of information out there. We're not experts on all the issues, but neither are they. They're just looking for good information, and who better than librarians to really do that research and be able to talk about whatever the issues are, especially if we can represent what we would like to see happen and the changes.
Absolutely.
And want me to add something?
Yes.
So just a couple other thoughts, and again, completely agree with Mary and Kent. So the other 2 things I wanted to share that we've learned is that, one, so in terms of scheduling for National Library Legislative Day, what we've learned is to ask them in a 2 or 3 day period, what 30-minute window of time do you have? And we found that that's a lot more successful. And the reason why I say that is because we traditionally divide our team up into four teams in order to accommodate a lot of simultaneous meetings, but it's really helped as far as getting FaceTime with them. And the other thing I would say is that with the student ambassadors, the other interesting thing that we found very successful is that by them meeting with them, we are able to follow up with email thanks and correspondence that really has proven very successful for us in terms of the legislative aid actually responding to us. So I think Lamont is shaking his head. He remembers that email chain where for months we were trying to reach out to a senator's office and we couldn't get any response whatsoever. And then I had the mother of a third grader who, third grade, they're always all cute, reach out and say thanks and we appreciate your support, and immediately their legislative aid responded. And so I would say that would be the other thing that we've learned, nuance, that has been very helpful.
And Anthony, I think you mentioned about the virtual presence too. We have up year round on our library website, which I'm sure many other libraries do too. We have the return on investment calculator, of course, but we have our talking points. So whether it's a local issue or a state or federal, we post that and update it on a regular basis and send it out to our constituents. And I think it makes a difference, because when we ask them to go and advocate, whether it's in Annapolis or DC or at the locally, they have that information with them. So not only do they say how much they love libraries, but they can actually speak intelligently about one of the issues as much as we are aware. And that really makes a difference too.
That's awesome. Ken, did you have anything to add?
Well, I might kind of launch into where we're going with the next part of this, I think, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And just thinking about what actually goes on that day beyond the preparation. And we've all been talking about preparation, and I think that's a huge key, and knowing what you're going to say when you get there. But I think a key part of your pitch is making it local for them, and really understanding the idea that each one, especially on the House side, that everybody is really focused on their district. And that's something to always keep in mind when you're crafting your message and you're having the individual conversations. And it's knowing not just what the reps are interested in, but it's also knowing the background of their aides, if you can get that. And just an example of that, we are constantly running into congressional aides in Tennessee who have used the online databases that come through the state library. And that's one way you can really tune them in to the importance of libraries, if you can do it on the academic side with these aides. Another piece that I think we're kind of veterans at this, but first timers at National Legislative Day, I think they get a little bit freaked out when they see that the aides are the same ages as their grandkids or their kids or whatever. And but I think it's important that everybody realize those aides are really key. And whether they're in a congressional office for 2 years or 20 years, the aides, you want to make sure that you have a relationship with them as much as you do with the Congress people. I think you want to use data as much as possible to make your case, because they really relate to data. How many people are being served? What's the impact? What's the outcome of that? I think something that I didn't really figure out until after I'd been to Ledge Day the first couple of days, is that you do want to go to the briefing day. I really would recommend people not breeze in Monday afternoon and go over the next day and then leave Tuesday night. I think you really need to make time to come to the briefing day, because it's so critical. They're last minute updates. They're important things that you'll hear there. You'll get new ideas, similar to hopefully what you're picking up today. But just know that when you get to DC, that Monday is really important for picking up those last minute pieces of information. And it's not just ALA Washington staff on that agenda, but you'll be hearing from senators and representatives. You'll be hearing from lobbyists. You'll be hearing from staff and in the offices. And so it's really so important that people make time to do that.
Absolutely. And we are discussing best practices and tips that have made NLLD efforts successful. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I do. That's wonderful advice, Ken. And I agree. Going to the pre-day, hearing about the issues and listening is just wonderful. So if you can do that, I highly recommend it too. The other piece is do a little homework at your home base. So for example, for Maryland, we are, as a team, we explore who's on what committees. What are they in charge of? Can they actually vote on this? Can they write a letter of support? Or are they, in our case, Barbara Mikulski was oversight of very powerful committees. So she could not sign on because she was actually the chair of appropriations. So that makes things a little bit more complicated, not hard, but you just have to understand that. So when you're meeting with the aides, and they are amazing, and yes, they do look like they're about 12 years old sometimes, but they're wonderful. They're very knowledgeable, and they really do work well with the folks that they're representing. So when you do meet them, you just say, this is great. And you have to meet out in the hallway. That's great too. It really does work. And be a little bit prepared when you walk in and know your folks. And many times in Maryland, we're small. We're a small state in square footage. So I see a lot of the elected officials during the year, which makes it easy. But for everyone who lives in really large states with hundreds and hundreds, it's harder. But you do have that moment on the Hill to make that connection.
I agree. We do have to maintain our relationships with our aides and get to know them, because those are the folks that we engage in a lot of conversations about. And we've had plenty of experiences engaging with a discussion with our aides, Anthony, correct?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add, Anthony?
Sure. Just a couple of things. I would say one, be prepared on when you go to the Hill to meet those legislative aides at times that they will not know anything about libraries and or be disinterested. And that is certainly part of the game. I would say one of the most powerful interactions that I saw with the legislative aide that was completely disengaged was one of our 10-year-old student ambassadors got frustrated because the guy was looking at his watch, and we were in the hallway, and he walked up to him and said, "So how have libraries been important to you in your life?" And then he started to think about it, and kind of that 20 to 30, didn't have kids yet, they don't probably use libraries very much. And so he had to think about it. And it's like, so did I go to libraries when I was a kid? Oh yeah, that's right. Was the library important to you when you're getting your degree? Oh yeah, that's right. And so I would say that's also part of it. I think kind of as Ken said, some people get discouraged when they first feel that. I think I always say to our advocates that it's probably the best activity or the best way to express our civil liberties is to go up to the Hill and talk to people that are not interested at all in what you have to say. It's very humbling, but that's freedom and liberty at its best. So I'd say number one, be prepared for that and don't be dismayed. I think that one of the things I would say as an instructor, as a faculty member, is that our students will say the same thing. The more we talk without them saying anything or us asking them questions, the more bored they get. So I would say that probably is a good strategy, is engage them in that conversation and make sure that you're asking questions of them. So that would be number one. I would say the other part to kind of building the house is that, and LaJuan, has been very important in this too, is we realize that a lot of the work is got to be at the local level. And so more specifically, when we are now really focused on creating district advocacy groups. And because what we've realized is that the percentage of actual legislators that we talk to when we go to the Hill is not great. And so what we've been doing now is kind of capturing them when they're local. And not only has it been very effective because we've kind of set it up as the student ambassador really like to meet their member of Congress. So that's been very helpful. But the other that we're working on this year is creating kind of a congressional district advocacy group, right? So it's way too expensive to bring them all to DC. But what we realized, kind of building on what Ken said, is a real wide range of people that voted for them or not, but in their voting district that represent school libraries, public libraries, academic libraries, and certainly the types of users that use libraries. So that's one of the things that we're really working on this year, is to try to create those. So we have 13 congressional districts creating, and I'm not saying we can necessarily do it this year, but we're working on creating 13 local advocacy groups to really take the national advocacy down to the grassroots level.
And Anthony, that brings up the other thing is, I mentioned it earlier about this is a 365-day a year process. And many times you can reach out to your locals, especially if you're not next door to DC like we are, and meet with them during the year. Invite everyone. If you do a ribbon cutting, if you do a groundbreaking, if you just have, we do a fairy tale festival, trust me, they all get invitations to attend. Most don't come, but occasionally they'll send their aides, but they remember that. They remember that we just didn't think of them that one day when I'm in DC walking the hill, but that they're part of what's going on. And during our invitation to them, we thank them for everything they've done on behalf of libraries across the country. It resonates with them. You know, we all like to be part of the cool gang and the in crowd, and they're the same as us. They like those invitations, whether they come or not, that's fine. If they send a proclamation, that's fine, but they want to be included and invited. So don't ever forget, that's very powerful.
Allow them to celebrate your successes with you. I think that's really key. Whether you're recognizing some milestone for the library or whatever that might be, that's a really good way to keep them engaged.
Absolutely. And what we're talking about here is how advocacy works outside of NLLD. It seems like we all have different strategies and processes for doing that. Mary, are there some other activities that you engage in outside of NLLD?
Oh, absolutely. Because we know, I mean, I can talk about the library till the cows come home, and so can everyone else, but they want to hear from other folks. So we are so engaged in the community. We sponsor so many other activities, agencies, organizations. I just met with a new vendor possibility, Mind Grub, which is a national company, to do some work for us. And he said, you're everywhere. When I researched the library, he said, your logo is everywhere. I said, it is, and that's deliberate. I want everybody to think, you know, when they want to do something, they don't think of us last, or I don't have to beg to be part of it. They come to us first and say, do you want to be part of this? What would you like to do? We want you on that team. Because we know our elected officials, that's what they hear. They're small businessmen, they're doctors, they're lawyers, you name whatever their background is, or their families. They see you're really engaged in what's happening in your community. That really gets you a lot of brownie points. And word of mouth, that's what they know. They talk about the library doing super cool and awesome things. And that's what we want. It goes back to, I think, Anthony, you mentioned the wow factor. We're all about that wow factor. We don't just do things that are mediocre. We do that wow factor. I want that wow. The library does that because they remember that, and they won't. When they see you coming, it will click with them.
And I just want to throw out, just kind of building on what was said. I think that the other thing that we learned when we went to NLLD is actually being told that the other thing that we could do, as far as, so the question was lobbyists. Should we hire a lobbyist for the state of North Carolina? And the response was, in many ways, you might want to save your money and instead serve as kind of a, kind of building what Mary said, serve as a resource for all of your legislators. So that's, and Lawana, we know about this too, but we talked about, again, part of this local advocacy group, you know, the 13 advocacy groups, is they basically said what you could really help with is just kind of being, you know, in the background and letting them know if they ever need a witness, if they ever need data, if they ever need someone to fly up to Washington to testify, that they know who to go to. And so that's definitely something else that we're trying to organize ourselves around. It's a great point. So instead of paying for lobbyists, maybe we set aside some money to fly a witness out there when they need, you know, somebody to testify on behalf of libraries. And the other thing I would say, so having the good fortune of being a strategic planner in the state of North Carolina, is that the stereotypes are alive and well. So whether it be a city leader or whether it be a county leader, the same stereotypes occur over and over again. As our libraries needed anymore? What's the future of libraries? And again, it's not to say that's all community leaders, but I definitely know in the state of North Carolina, it seems pretty pervasive from the city on up. And I'm not going to say that the national leaders necessarily share that all the way, but I definitely can see that clearly, to me, people that don't use libraries or are not in libraries as of recently really don't have an accurate view on what libraries do for people now.
I might pick up on something Mary touched touched on, and when we're talking about collaborations and people that help us tell the message throughout the year or actually at Legislative Day, and that's using our ALA champions, our corporate champions, and your local champions as well, and really reaching out to that business side. We're fortunate here in Nashville and that Ingram Content is located here in Nashville, and they are actually one of our great partners on Legislative Day. But I would wager that every librarian, whether they have a large corporate entity in their town or whether they have smaller businesses that just support the library, that they have somebody they can really reach out to help carry their message either on Legislative Day or those other 364 days of the year at home to really get their message to their congressmen and their senators. And I think those collaborations are really, really key. And I can't speak enough about how important it's been for us here in Nashville.
That's great. At this point, I'd like to ask you all, do you have any other tips or recommendations for library supporters who want to advocate but don't know how or are not sure who to reach out to? We'll start with Kit.
Oh boy. Well, I mentioned the state library earlier, but the state library is a great place to begin. Also, obviously your local public library, see what's going on there. I've always been a great believer in Friends of the Library groups. And in fact, our state Friends group is very engaged in what we do at the national level. And, people should be reaching out to their local Friends groups if they want to get going. Because by definition, Friends are some of your best advocates. I would even say here that, we have our own lobbyists with Metro Nashville government, and many governmental units do. And they sometimes do collaborative lobbying across the state, both at the state and federal level. And if you don't have anything going, you might reach out to those folks to see if they have an idea where to begin. So I think there are a lot of different avenues that you can take, and certainly ALA's Washington office and ALA offices as well. The Washington office is helping to sponsor this today, and there are a lot of great resources in that office.
Absolutely. Mary, anything to add?
I would agree. I would start with looking online. ALA has some great resources out there. It just kind of gives you the background and things to look for and to follow. Locally, also in Maryland, we do work with the lobbyists, and the lobbyists, what they do, it's on the state level, of course, but they open the doors. They make it easier for us to get in and meet one-on-one with folks, which is critical. Your Friends group, that's how I started in libraries many years ago as a Friends officer. They can be very powerful. They really care about the library because remember, they're spending their volunteer time to do something for you. They can be your great Grassroots. If you need advocates at your local budget hearings, send your Friends officers out, give them talking points, and trust me, they will do a great job. Same thing for the national things, for National Library Leadership Day. If you can get those representatives there, they're great spokesmen, and they like to listen to them because they are their constituents. Please keep that in mind. We're kind of the inside folks. They love us, but they know we're coming to talk about all the great things they do. They want to hear from the kids, the teens. If you have teen advisory groups, that's another group. Trust me, they all love to hear from the teens in your communities. So there's tons of resources out there, trainings available. There's lots of webinars like this one that will really help you get started. But my bottom line is, don't be afraid. You love what you're doing. You're in the library field because of what you're doing and the difference we make. That is passionate, and that message sometimes resonates so strongly with people when you're talking about what we do, no matter what type of library you are. So don't be afraid to tackle it.
Right, and Anthony, did you have anything?
Yeah, I would say so. In my management class, I use a video of we call it the leadership lessons from the dancing guy, and basically the point of it is it's the dancing guy starts with one guy who gets up there and starts dancing as a concert, and by the end of the video, everybody in the lawn is dancing. And so I use that as an example of we're all passionate about libraries, and so if, for example, you believe that there's not enough advocacy going on either locally or at your state level, definitely take a leadership role. Be that lone dancing person to kind of get that started. And I would say, kind of building on that. So building on what Kent and Mary said, I think definitely starting with your state library, and certainly your library association is the way to go. But take that leadership role. If you're passionate about it, definitely jump in there and start dancing, right? So, but the other thing I would say, with and Luana and I again are working on this, so we're realizing that the scripts and kind of providing an accurate perspective on how advocacy actually is received on the legislator end is something that we're also helping with. So we've been asked by other friends of libraries could you give us a clearer script on what we're supposed to do? So for example, oftentimes people are afraid to call because they're not sure they're going to talk to the actual legislator. Are they going to talk to the legislative aide? And many of us that have been doing this for a long time, they're not going to talk to anybody. They're going to go to voicemail, or they're going to go to the admin assistant that basically says, okay, we will tally that for the member of Congress. So I think just for people knowing that, it's a lot less. They're a lot less fearful of reaching out because they know they have a different perception as far as how their message is going to be received.
Thank you so much. And I would just like to piggyback on what Kent said with regards to the LA Washington office. They have a great tool called the Legislative Action Center that allows you to find your elected officials, follow federal legislation that has implications for libraries, and provide communication support for legislators through a variety of platforms to include email, social media, and phone. It's really a one-stop shop for some great advocacy tools. Is there anything else that you all would like to add before we conclude?
Well, I did want to throw out one other thing, and it just builds on really the Friends of the Library. So this happened to us this last year. The chair of the Friends of the Library of Forsyth County was actually not on the docket to join us in D.C., and she volunteered herself. And I remember receiving the phone call and being really confused as far as what to do, but the end of the moral of the story is that she knows Senator Burr personally, right? And so it's funny how we all call out Senator Burr, and she calls him Richard.
Yeah.
and obviously in terms of relationships, that's really hard to argue with that. And so yes, I think I guess the moral of that story is that we have a listserv, and we're not really sure sometimes who gets to which legislator. But I think sometimes it's not any of us, it's someone on the receiving end that has a personal relationship with the legislator that really causes its great effect. So.
And I would say use your resources wisely. That's great, Anthony. It's all about relationships. It's who you know who knows people. And remember, all your electeds are back from your state. So they have family and friends. And think, if you have a foundation fundraising arm for your library system, tap into them, because they tend to be your movers and shakers in your community. You might have a library board, and some of the library board trustees are amazing and they know folks. So use your resources, talk about how important the library is, and use your staff too. If you have staff, get the information out to them, because remember, if you have 400 staff employees, they know 400 people who know 400 people who know 400 people, and who better to sell your story than people who work with it every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I might just throw out that, for our listeners out there that are thinking, they want to get into this, but they aren't sure how, and can I do it? Legislative Day is a great experience, and they shouldn't let it intimidate them. There are a lot of people there with them, and the offices that you go to, they're just people. We certainly respect the offices, the elected offices, but you'll find some amazing and wonderful people you'll get to interact with in Washington. So I would really encourage anybody that's thinking about this just to figure out where their state coordinator is and jump into it and go after it.
Absolutely. Well, this does conclude our webinar. I'd like to thank all of my guests for making this webinar possible. It's our hope that this overview has given you some ideas and tools to use as you make your way through your advocacy journeys. We will share links to the CLL webpage, the Grassroots Subcommittee webpage, the ALA Washington office page, and then any other additional information that we have that pertains to this webinar. Of course, you will have all of our contact information too. Thank you all for participating, and I hope you have the best of days. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, can I ask you a quick question?